I'm reminded of a line in the Gospels where Jesus Christ is giving a parable of the Last Judgment, and he talks about how he's going to separate people from his right and his left. And the people on his left will be cast into eternal fire, and people on his right will be counted among the book of life. And the qualifier that he uses to judge people is, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. Did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? Did you visit those who were in bonds? And I've noticed that a lot of people consider that just to be sentiment. And it's one of my biggest grievances with the religion that I grew up in was how unkind it could be. Hello, everybody. My name is Caleb WH, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. On this corner of the internet, we talk about everything from anime to storytelling to philosophy and theology. It's very good to make your acquaintance, and I hope you guys enjoy this small little reflection. I didn't know what I exactly was going to film today. All I knew was that I wanted to film a video, but I was scrolling on Twitter, and I found this Twitter account called Restoring Your Faith in Humanity. And I was just scrolling, and I started enjoying a lot of the kind, warm acts of human dignity and sweetness that were on this account. And I was very happy. I was very happy to give this person a retweet. But I got to thinking about Christianity again, because of course I did. It's my autistic obsession at this point. And I got to thinking about a grievance that I've had about the Christian life in particular, especially where I've grown up. I'm very lucky to live in a part of the world that is at least tolerant of Christianity. There is a mild miffedness in some cases to the religion itself. But I live in a part of the world that is very tolerant of it. But I have often thought that the religion itself, is almost counterintuitive in the way that it thinks about kindness. And so I wanted to make this reflection on that subject of kindness and what it means, how you can do it, and how I have grown to. That is one of my favorite virtues, and one that I consider to be probably the most attractive in people is a very kind heart. So what's interesting about modernity and the modern world is often people are very utilitarian, which means they don't necessarily hate each other, but they are mildly indifferent or miffed with other people. We live in a vain, materialistic world, a world obsessed with vanity and pride and things like that. And perhaps one of the sole arbiters of getting rid of vanity itself is kindness. I haven't seen a better eliminator of vanity than true kindness, both material and immaterial kindness. So, what is foundationally, what you have to understand about kindness and modernity is the modern world is not kind. It is filled with utility, but it's not kind. It's not out to care for you. It doesn't care about you, which is both a blessing and a curse. Indifference is often cruel because it doesn't care about you, but it leaves room for you to be kind and to make more of an impact on people. If the world hates you, then you're working on a kind of debuff. If the world is kind to you, then you're not virtuous at all. If you're indifferent, there's just enough adversity and there's just enough level playing field to be kind and to change people's lives. Growing up, I was bullied a lot, and because of this, I grew a huge affinity for those who were outcasted, and this has carried into everything that I write here, every video that I make, etc. And I know that most people may be watching this video like, who wants to hear a philosophical diatribe on kindness, right? That's not what I want to spend my evening doing. I want to spend my afternoon watching hour-long video essays on Pokemon, right? I promise you I'll try to make this at least slightly interesting for you. But I wanted to talk about the subject in particular because it is perhaps the most lacking virtue, I think, in modernity, is kindness. And sure, there is a problem with chastity. There's a problem with temperance, right? But kindness, I think, is just inches out, because it's not necessarily because we hate each other, but because we're indifferent towards each other. Kindness is a virtue that is characterized by its by its willing the good of the other, by its love for the other. And love is perhaps one of the most tragically misunderstood facets of virtue. That's a video in and of itself, and that deserves an entire diatribe that I would love to go on. But what you need to understand about kindness is an act of love. It's what it's supposed to be. It's how it's supposed to be instituted in the world, is through love, to will the good of the other. I'll save my diatribe on the concept of love and how it's tragically misunderstood in modernity. But what you basically need to understand is that kindness is to will the good of the other and to act upon said premise. I often use the analogy of a couple. Does a couple love a woman if they love how they make them feel, or do they love a person if they want the good for that person for their own sake, and they're willing to act kindly towards them in order to get that from them? Obviously, any sane person would argue the second, but it's kind of hard to articulate because most people think of love as a feeling, a kind of Rousseauian amour propre version of love, and that is a problem. So, with all of that diatribe out of the way, I think it is best to start with a definition of kindness. If I had to define kindness in the way that I think about it, I would say that it's acting in love or charity. It's acting to will the good of the other. So if you see somebody who's hungry, like a homeless man who has no money or food, you give them money and food. If you see a person, struggling to pay for something, you pay it forward. You see a person struggling to cross the street, you help them cross the street. You see a person struggling with a test, you try to help them with the concept that they're missing. You see a person who's alone or sad or depressed, you go up there and you talk to them. And these are very profound, maybe small, mundane ways that we try to be kind to one another. I think everyone has an intuitive sense on what it looks like. Nobody really knows what it is, if that makes sense. When I was growing up, this is what drove me to make friends. I had a choice when I was very young. I could have let the world get to me and become unkind, or I could have made sure that unkindness or bullying didn't happen to anyone else. And thank the Lord I chose the latter. I made some of the best friends that I've ever made in my life because I decided to go sit with people that didn't have anybody to sit with. I chose to go talk to people who looked like they were being made fun of. And I'm very glad that I did that. But so when people ask me about the virtues that I find to be the most attractive, I usually say kindness. I've grown to love kindness as something sweet. I've grown to see it as something beautiful rather than something tedious or monotonous, because it doesn't happen very often in modernity. And I wish the world was kinder. I make videos about a wide array of subjects. I also write about a wide array of subjects, and one of the most prominent through lines in a lot of what I write is on love, like what love is, how to love, etc. And since converting to Christianity, I have had this profound sense of love for the other that hasn't left. And it's not from me, it's from him. And I feel as if when I discuss this subject that there is often a kind of misunderstanding on this subject, or at the very least a kind of miffedness, like, oh yeah, kindness, whatever, right? But you'd be surprised how uncommon it is if you're one of those people, and you'd be even more surprised how beautiful it is when I see it. Um, I can't imagine something even more beautiful in the context of kindness when somebody is kind in a especially rough situation, when the odds are stacked against them or love is being deprived of them, but they still choose to love anyway. I have a poem that I wrote, or a poetic line that I wrote that I wanted to keep, um, which I wrote and I published on my publication, which is um, love's holiest form of rebellion is when the deprived chooses to love others anyway. Kafka's night is nothing compared to heaven's morning. And I think that is a wonderful way of describing it. If you have someone that you see as repulsive, someone who's done something evil or disgusting, that's Christ. Go and be with them. Those who are in bonds, those who are poor, those who are outcasted and misunderstood, that is Christ. And I choose to love them. Love and kindness is very difficult, especially when people have hurt us, when we have people in our lives that have maybe given us a hard time or have made our lives extremely difficult. But I can't think of a more holy form of rebellion than loving that person anyway. I give an example. I have a very bad relationship, as you guys know, with my mother, but a complicated relationship with my mother, but not because I think that she has done anything to earn it, but because I was loved by Christ, I choose to love her anyway. Even though I may disagree with how she thinks or how she operates, I deeply care about her, and I care about her independent of what she's done. And I wish this prospect was more common in the world. I wish people were more kind. I wish people looked at those who were suffering and who were being misunderstood, who have gone through trials, who may be considered ugly, maybe who are considered repulsive to people, and just loved them. This is a skill, luckily, I learned very, very early in my life, but it is a skill that I have kept very, very close to me. Um, it's perhaps no small secret that my version of this concept was not something that I was is not something I was very you would be surprised how cynical I was on this concept growing up. You'd be surprised how cynical I was about the concept of kindness, about being good to people, about being kind to people. And then I was treated to kindness when I was giving it to the world and I felt like I wasn't getting any return. When someone treated me with kindness and treated me like a friend, it broke me open. It's a story for another time, but you have no idea how impactful kindness can be, especially when it isn't deserved or it's kind of out of nowhere and you're given really no reason to be kind. I mean, everybody loves their friends and everybody that they like, right? Even the pagans have that, right? Even the most, remote Amazonian tribe has that, right? What is the true mark of love is when you're able to will the good of maybe people that don't care about you, maybe people who hate you, maybe people who you find repulsive. Treat those people like Christ. When you treat a homeless person with dignity, when you treat a poor person, when you treat a harlot, when you treat someone who has committed a vast amount of sins with kindness and dignity, that is the true mark of a Christian. And it's a true mark of, at the very least, someone who has cultivated that sense of virtue. It's not easy, and there's certainly people that seek to take advantage of said things, but I would argue that what you do to the least of these, you do to me, is not sentiment. It's not just comfortable. It's not something that is. It's not something that is that you just put on a Protestant worksheet. It's life. It's the way we're supposed to act in the world. One of the grievances I had growing up with Christianity was how people would say that they were Christian, but they would not act on the basic tenets of the gospel. They would cherry pick what they considered to be good and what they considered to be bad. And to some degree, we all do this. But it was especially bad where I grew up. And I grew up around people who thought Christians were evil, thought Christians were out to get them, that Christians hated them. And nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, we don't love sin, but we love you, who is a sinner, and so are we. And I just am very grieved about this subject, because I think that the world would be a better place if it was more kind. So what can you do to be more kind? What can you do to cultivate this virtue? Well, as always, I would ask that you talk to a spiritual advisor or a priest first on the small things that you can do. But anything goes a long way. I think one of the key tenets I think you guys need to keep in mind for the first part of this is that you have no idea how freeing it is to be kind to people when you realize that social norms are all fake. or rather, all of the fears that you have about people judging you or that. So just throw this out the window, especially if you're being kind to people. Because if there's a social norm or there's a social stigma around being, treating Christ as he is, then, who's the least of these, then that social norm is not worth following. I think once you realize that you are free to do these things, that you are free to be kind, is when you actually are able to be kind. So that's the first thing you need to keep in mind. The second thing you need to keep in mind is look around. There's so many people out there who you can talk to. Most people are going about their day-to-day business, especially in the country that I live, individually. If you kind of break into their world and you talk to them, you'll be surprised how many people are receptive to it. A lot of people have this opinion that it's like awkward or I don't want to do it. But once you break into that mold, it's much, much easier to be kind. A third thing you can do is, if you don't have material, there's immaterial things you can do. You can volunteer places. You can help people without asking. You can ask people if they need help with anything. You can look around in your community and see if anybody needs help with something. You can treat everyone as what they are, which is an image of God. And you'll be surprised how many opportunities can open yourself. For instance, if you have a neighbor who's moving in, ask if they need help moving stuff in. Introduce yourself to them. If you're in an apartment complex, bring your neighbors something to eat one day if you have a bit of extra money. If you don't have a bit of extra money, volunteer your time for people. If you're at the store and you see somebody who's struggling with something, help them out. If you see somebody who's afraid of something, offer to help. There is nothing more punk than Christianity. There's nothing more punk than kindness. I mean, think about how many social norms you break doing that. Think about how many establishments you undercut in just being kind to people. And I think the message we can take away from this. There are plenty of ways to be more kind. Sin is highly unoriginal, is one of my favorite lines from one of the books that I wrote. It's in The Wretched Psalter. Sin is highly unoriginal, but virtue is endless. There are so many ways you can be virtuous, and there are so little ways you can sin. And if that's a good motivator for you, then it is a good motivator for you. And I'm very glad that it's a good motivator for you. But thank you for coming to see this diatribe on kindness. If you guys want, you guys can check out my socials. I will put my Substack down in the description, and I will put my Twitter there as well. The last two articles that I have written are on the hatred of religion and on categorical queerness. And if you find those two things to be riveting or controversial, I would highly recommend reading them on my Substack. And yeah, you can check out my socials where all of my half-baked rants and jokes and commentaries on storytelling you can find there. Thank you guys so much for watching. May God bless you. And yeah, have a wonderful day.